Laine, RFAs, the CBA, oh my, all kinds of nuggets coming out of the European Players Media Tour. And our own Chris Johnston was right in the thick of it. And Chris, I have to start with Patrik Laine. It's been 3 days. I'm still shook. But what were your initial impressions on his comments about playing in Winnipeg?
You never know where you're gonna play next year, so I'm just prepared for anything.
Well, I was a little surprised, I guess, obviously, just because you don't know what you're going to get, how much honesty you're going to get. And, you know, in this case, it really started from a rather straightforward question about how he's handled the contract uncertainty, whether it was weighing on him. And as part of his answer to that question, he said, I know I'll be playing somewhere next season, which prompted some follow-ups about Winnipeg and him talking about just not sure what the team's thinking, where things are going to head there. So, you know, it was a bit of a surprise, but I think if I step back now with having a couple days and just look at the landscape league-wide, you know, this is a summer unlike any that have been around in the years I've been a hockey journalist, and I don't think we know how this will all be resolved and what it's going to lead to. And, you know, it just stands to reason if you're a player that you know, it's your future at hand here, you're even more invested in it and unsure.
What I found interesting about it, Chris, is you've got Kyle Connor, who was saying that he's had conversations about a potential long-term deal, and then you have Laine saying he's had no conversations at all. So do you feel like Kevin Cheveldayoff may have countered them differently or is having different conversations with the two? Should he be prioritizing one over the other?
Well, I do think that how this goes down is important for the Jets, just as, you know, a year ago at this time when the Toronto Maple Leafs said William Nylander, Mitch Marner, and Austin Matthews all in need of second contracts, that the order in which you do those deals becomes important. I mean, I suppose one difference is that Nylander's contract expired last year, whereas the other two guys went through to this season. But, you know, if you're planning in Winnipeg to give more money to Patrik Laine, it might be best to get the other player done first in this case, because, you know, what we've seen, and, you know, especially with Mitch Marner's ongoing negotiations, Toronto, is that he's asking about, you know, his position vis-a-vis his teammates. And because Austin Matthews got a certain number, because John Tavares signed in Toronto, that's dictated where some of Mitch Marner's asks have gone. You know, I would think that if Patrik Laine signed his big deal first, that perhaps Kyle Connor would be arguing, based on the number of goals he scored and those types of things, that he deserves the same thing. So, you know, it is a tricky dance. I don't know that certainly that one suggests that Kyle Connor's staying and that Patrik Laine is going. I don't think it's that simple. I just think this is this really strange summer, and they're trying to do them in a certain order.
And that brings up the point that it feels like Marner will be the domino to fall, and hopefully everyone else will fall in line after that once they have a better idea of what their value may be. But do you see Marner not being the first, or is that the only outcome we can have? It's been so strange.
No, I do see a scenario where he isn't the first, and it probably goes something like this. You know, if we get to September 10th or 11th, a day or two out from when training camps open, it's possible there's movement in the other situations that have nothing to do with Mitch Marner. That, you know, let's say Matthew Tkachuk and the Calgary Flames, you know, both decide that they don't see any value in him missing time in camp, and they're able to bridge the gap. I do think that there's, you know, a likelihood here that some of these players are signed before the start of training camp. It would be truly weird if this group of 8 or 10 high-end RFAs all didn't have a deal at that point. And I'm not that confident at this stage. I mean, it's early. A lot can happen in negotiation that Mitch Marner necessarily will be signed for the start of the Maple Leafs training camp. So, you know, I think that there are a couple different scenarios of how this is going to go down. Certainly, if I do think if Mitch Marner signed his deal, you know, on August 30th, that it does trigger a domino effect in the lead up to those camps, because there'll be more of a market established here. But I still think we got some twists and turns ahead, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Do you feel like this RFA climate might have some impact on CBA negotiations or the conversations they're having, maybe softer cap being a possibility, or is that not really being brought up?
I'd be surprised if the league ever went to a softer cap, just because, you know, they gave up an entire season to get the hard cap. But I would not be surprised if we saw some changes to the way second contracts are given out in the league, or some of the rules around them, maybe even some change to the rookie deals, and having players be able to earn more on their entry-level contracts might ease some of the burden where these guys feel that they have to extract every last dollar out of their second NHL deal. You know, I think this is going to be a very hot topic when the league and the Players Association dig into it. You know, my sense at this point is that they haven't got to that sort of specific, you know, they haven't dug down to that degree yet. So it's hard to say where it's going to head. But, you know, they've certainly had some surface discussions about the big picture, what the union likes with the current deal, things they'd like to see changed. The league has done similar. And as they work towards now figuring out how they're going to, get to work on the next CBA, it would not surprise me to see some kind of changes here. I mean, it could even be as simple as putting arbitration in for players that take their second contract. That would mean if you're, say, Besser in the Canucks this summer and you have a difference of opinion on what that second deal could be, you go before an arbitrator and that person awards you a contract, and it keeps you from having to sit out. Because the truth is, for all these players, really their only piece of leverage at this stage in the game is missing time, trying to make their team uncomfortable by missing the start of camp or missing games. And that's all they can do to try to get a better contract if the team isn't willing to pay them what they think they're worth. So, I don't believe this serves the league in the big picture to have star players with this uncertainty, with these kind of questions being asked. And again, we could have a pretty crazy mid-September to start of October if all these guys remain unsigned through camp and into the start of the season. So, that's something we'll be monitoring as the CBA talks get pushed along. And, I do think something has to change, because let's face it, the reason these players have such interest and why they're asking for the money they are is because they've changed the way we look at the game. These are some of the biggest stars in the league. We're talking about guys who've led their team in scoring at age 19 or 20, who put up magnificent seasons, and they deserve to get paid while they're at the top of the sport.
Another topic that Bill Daly brought up was the idea of creating a long-term international calendar of events, and the World Cup of Hockey in 2021 was one thing that was thought about. What kind of tweaks would be made if they brought it back?
Well, what's interesting is I believe at this time that the players and the league have an understanding that if they're able to get through this next period and extend the CBA, not let it expire, obviously not go through another work stoppage, that they would have a World Cup as soon as February 2021 in season. So that means, a couple of tweaks from what we saw back at the 2016 World Cup. You've got no training camps. You've probably got no exhibition games. It would be a week or just a little bit more tournament, maybe a more midi-style tournament rather than having the All-Star game in February. But, this is something that I believe the players have been in favor of for some time. The idea of these in-season tournaments, it's a little harder to come out of the summer and jump right into a best-on-best event as they did back in 2016. And so, this is not, by any means signed, sealed, and certified. It's really contingent on what happens with the wider CBA negotiations. But, I think it is a signal that the league and the Players Association have prioritized getting the best players back on the ice together. All these young guys haven't had a chance to really get to go in a best-on-best sort of tournament. And, we could be seeing one here in just a little bit over a year and a half if they manage to negotiate a CBA.
If you want to hear more about what Daly had to say, you can see Chris Johnston's article at sportsnet.ca. Chris, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.